All right, so first of all, congratulations if you made it this far. You're starting to get a lot of the basics of PHP under your belt. With practice, that'll become easier and easier. So the next thing we're going to introduce is something called functions. Now, as our applications grow, we need a way to structure and keep our code organized. And this is important for a number of reasons. First of all, most of the time you don't want all your code to execute, and you don't want a lot of spaghetti code with a bunch of if statements and all of that. So you really want to structure your code. And the function keyword allows us to create functions, and that's one way that we can structure our code. Another reason we want to structure our code is because we want to have code that's maintainable. And as you progress in your programming experience, you will understand why it's important to have code that's maintainable. So let's talk about functions, and we're going to create a kind of a naive case. We're going to add two numbers together, and we're going to create a function to do that. So let's say I have two numbers. I have 5 and I have a num2, and let's say that's 7. I already know how to add two numbers. PHP lets me do this sum, and I can just do num1 plus num2. And if I want, I can echo all of this out. So let's go ahead and echo this out. That looks nice right there. So I'm going to say the sum of num1 plus num2 is whatever that is. And so we're going to run this. We're not really doing any functions yet. And I get what I expected. The sum of 5 plus 7 is 12. So under the hood, this operator is really a function that's defined as part of PHP. But for our case, I want to use the function keyword, and we're going to create an add function. And when I create a function, it's going to have this format. First of all, it takes a name. And this name, again, just like our variables, we want to create a name that makes sense. Part of having maintainable code. If I name this A, maybe for add, and I come back to this in a year, I'd be like, well, what was A? And I'd have to actually review the code in the code block to understand what A was. And add is a more meaningful name, right? So I would know, hey, this is an add function. And so after I declare a function, I create the name, there's an open and close paren. Let's come back to that in a second. And then here's a code block. And here's where I'd put my code to actually create this add function. Here's where I can put some arguments. I can put in, for example, whatever the first number is, I can call it, go ahead and take the IntelliSense here. So we'll call it A, and then we'll call the second number B. I have a function, has two input parameters, A, and it has a B. And then what I can do is I can return the sum, which is A plus B. So this is a function that now will add two numbers together. So I don't have to use the operand. I could call our function A plus B now, and I should get the same result. And you can see it still says the output is 12. Now just to play with this, let's make sure I'm going to add 1 to this. I should see 13 here. And now it says 13. So I'm going to go back to the original one. So it's A plus B. And let's take one more look at this syntax for declaring a function. So I use the function keyword. I have the name, which is in purple. And then inside the parentheses, I can put whatever parameters I want to pass into that function. Then I have my code block, so I can have some code here, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And then I have a return statement, and I can return whatever that value is. So I don't have to put this on maybe one line. I could have said, the sum is A plus B, and then I could return it like this. That is still valid PHP. So I could do my logic and then have a return value. In the later versions of PHP, I think 7 and above maybe, you can declare what types these parameters are and what return type you're expecting. So the type for A I'm expecting in this particular case is an int. The type for B I'm expecting is an int. And the return value here, I'm expecting to return an int as return. Now you can see as you're starting to use this function, if you hover over it, it's expecting 2 ints as parameters and it's returning an int. So again, I can run this, nothing's changed, I should get 12 back here, and indeed I do. So just to drive this home a little bit more, let's imagine that I have some mathematical expression and it's going to look like this. And so my mathematical expression looks like 5 plus 7. And so what I want to do is I want to take this expression and I want to actually calculate that and see what the result is. So I can't just use my add anymore. What are we going to do with this expression? The first thing I need to do is I need to parse the expression. After I parse the expression, I'm going to end up with pulling these things apart. So I'm going to have a number 1, the second number, and I'm going to have in the middle, I'm going to have some operator. And so once I get done parsing the expression, then I should be able to use that information and compute the result. Let's break these up. I'm going to parse this expression. Maybe I need some function then called parse expression. And the input to this is going to be this string, and it's going to be whatever the expression is. And I can use whatever name I want. I'm just going to keep the name the same. It doesn't matter. And when I'm all done, I'm going to return out of here maybe an array. So for example, let's just return what we think we're going to get. So the result's going to be an array. And I think what I want to try to land on is I'm going to end up with num1 as 5. And I'm going to end up with num2 as 7. And then I'm going to end up with the operator as plus. So when I get all done, this is the result that I want to land on, and then I'm going to return that result. This result is an array, so I can return an array here. Oh, and it's barking at me because I forgot my $sign. Okay, so far this does not function, right? I'm not really parsing. I'm just hard coding the result that I want to get, and I'm returning it. That's what this is. I'm going to end up with, after I get done parsing it, I'm going to end up with some array called parts, let's call it, and we're going to use our parse expression and we're going to feed expression in. So this will be an array then. And just to kind of see what that array looks like, maybe we can use a for each and loop over all of this as a key value. And I'm just going to echo the key and echo the value. Okay, so that's part number one. I'm just going to parse this out. I'm going to echo out what I have here. And just to, for debugging purposes, how about we echo out the expression up here? Let's get rid of all these. I don't need that. And for here, I want to put the character. So if I were to run this right now, we should see an expression, and then we should see the parts that are being parsed out of there. And again, we haven't made this work yet, so we're just going to see what that looks like. So let me just run this. And so I get the initial expression. It's 5 plus 7. It's a string. And I'm getting the results back. Now, obviously, I fudged that. So now how do we actually get these results for real? We can use a couple of functions in PHP that we haven't covered yet. And there's a whole bunch of functions. And as you see more and more functions, you'll start to remember them. The function that we're going to do right now is I have this string, and it looks like this. It's 5 plus 7. And I'm going to use a function called explode. And I'm going to just put parts in here. That's going to be my variable name. And I'm going to call a function called explode. It's going to look just like that. So let's go over what this function is. Explode, if I hover over it, it can tell you what it is. But I have the separator string. And it's going to look through whatever string I feed it here. So this expression. And it's going to look for that separator. Every time it finds it, it's going to take and start to carve up that string into a number of different pieces. So I'm exploding that single string into a number of different parts. And so that's why I've labeled this as parts, and that's why we have that here. Again, we're building this, we're debugging this live, and so in the beginning, if you don't understand what this really is, you can do a for each loop. And we can do a parts as, let's do by part. And we're going to echo out every single part, just like that. In fact, I want to just let's do index. Let's put it in here. There you go. Let's write that. So again, this is just for debugging purposes. So I'm going to call this parse expression. I'm going to get in here. I'm going to explode the expression based upon that space character. So I should, every time I see a space, I'm going to chop that thing apart. So I'm going to end up with 3 pieces. I think a 5, a plus, and a 7. So let's look and see what this is now. I'm going to save that and we're going to run it. And you can see indeed, I have the initial expression. And then here is this for loop that's inside here. And you can see all the different parts. So index 0, that's the 5. That's the first number. Index 1 is the operator. And index 2 is num2. So knowing that, what I can do here is I can set my result. And I can parse these things out. So I can say num1 is at parts 0. Num2 is at parts, and that's index 2. And the operator is at parts index 1. And so now I really am parsing this, and I should end up with the same result as I had before. And just for now, what I can do is I can comment this kind of debug code out. I like to do it this way, so I keep it in when I'm building a function. I'm not really sure if it's done yet. I may have to print that out later on again. So I just keep it around, I comment it out. But let's run this again. Now I end up with num_1. The first number is 5, the second number is 7, and the operator is a plus sign. And you can see we did that by actually parsing out or exploding that initial expression. And I like to keep the code so it's clean and readable. So I would probably put every single one of these on a separate line, just like this. I think it's more readable. That's how I would leave it. Although there's no further logic after this, probably would just do this. I would return that thing directly and get rid of that extra statement. So this should all just work exactly the way as before. I'm not expecting any change over there. And now that we're sure that this is working, I'm going to get rid of this too. But I'm going to put a little note here. We'll come back to this in a little bit. So what if you have an expression after you explode it that you don't get 3 parts? Okay, we'll have to come back to that. But for now, this is parsing the expression that I fed in. So I fed in 5 plus 7. It's giving me num1, num2, and the operator. Okay, so this function, parse, is working for us. All right, so just to clean things up now, I probably would create variables here that are properly named. So I would say num1 is equal to parts, and that would be like this. Num2 is that, and operator is that. I have num1, num2 in the operator. This is probably how I would manage this. So now I have direct access to all the different pieces of this array. Now the next step is, I've already put this here, so let's compute the result. In an earlier video, we introduced a switch statement. And so what we're going to do is switch based upon the operator. What are we going to do? In case it's a plus sign, well, we already know what to do. So in case it's a plus sign, we're going to call our add function. And we're going to feed the 2 numbers in, just like that. And we call a break. And then we talked about this earlier, but maybe there's a default. So if I don't find an operator that I support, we're going to echo unsupported operation, and we'll echo out the operator that we didn't support, just like that. Let's see where we're at. So now we have an expression. We're going to print it out. We parse the expression. Then we pull or tweeze apart the actual values that are parsed out. And then I have this compute statement. So it's a switch statement based upon the operator. If it's a plus, we're going to call the add function that we already built. And we built an add function right here. And we can clean up this now. As we saw, we can just return this directly. So maybe it's only 1 line. And it comes through here, and I would maybe echo out the result, right? So remember before I had this nice thing where it said 5 plus 7. So let's go ahead and I can echo out the expression, right? So the expression has that 5 plus 7 already written for us. And then I can put an equal sign, and then I can put the result that we just computed, and then a BR. How about that? So let's run this and see what I get. And you can see 5 plus 7 is equal to 12. Just to clean some of this up, I don't need to echo this stuff out anymore because this was just for debug purposes. So we can get rid of that. I'm going to go ahead and just comment that out because I think that's kind of nice to see what our expression is every once in a while. Run this again now that we've kind of removed that code and cleaned it up a little bit, and we get 5 plus 7 is equal to 12. Now what if my expression is this? 5 minus 7. And I run this. What do we expect? So we're expecting to be able to parse it. It's going to get 3 parts, but the operator isn't supported, so I should see this line right here. And see, I see an unsupported operation, a minus symbol. So what do we do? So we could create another function down here. We had addition, but we'll have, say, a subtraction. That is going to return a minus b, just like that. And so let's go ahead and write that case. So if it's a minus operator, the result's I'm going to use sub. I still want to echo, and then I still want that break. So I'm starting to see some repeated code, and let's clean this up in just a second. But for now, let's go ahead and run this. And we see 5 minus 7 is minus 2. Let's go ahead and stub in our two more operands. Let's get a multiplier. So if I run it first, I should end up with unsupported function. And you know what we're going to do? We're just going to do the same thing we did before. I'm going to have a multiply function. And we'll end up with that, and we'll return a times b. And again, we're going to keep this just simple for now. We're going to repeat that code, repeat that, and we'll have another break in there. And we get 5 times 7 is that. I'm going to do one more. Let's do a division. So 5 divided by 7, unsupported operator. We'll repeat that same thing. This one we're going to have a little bit of issues with. So I'm going to write this just the way it is right now, and we'll see what it comes. So it's taking in an integer of a and integer of b, and it's returning an integer. And that might be a clue here because we have 5 and 7. Let's go ahead and keep it the way it is for now. So case of a division, what are we going to do? We're going to divide, echo, and break. So 5 divided by 7 is 0. Let's just put some different numbers in here and let's see if we get what we think we're going to get. So maybe 10 divided by 2, we would expect 5, and we do get 5. What this is really doing is this is doing integer division. Take your integer 10 divided by integer 2, you're going to get 5. But we know that sometimes division can take in integers, but a lot of times I'm returning a float here. So instead of this, it looks like it's the same, but that 5 is really a float. So let's go back now. Let's do maybe 10 divided by 3, because we know that doesn't go even. And let's see what we get. So now we get 10 divided by 3 is 3.3333, and it goes on forever. What we changed here was our division function needed to return a float. Now, when you really think about it, multiplication and division and subtraction and addition, all of these things, we have them pegged as integers right now, but really, all of these, if you really want to make this generic, probably should be floats. So if I just change the type for all of these, and I run this, you might think, is that going to break everything? Because up here, we have our switch statement. We're definitely feeding in whatever the number was. And when we parsed it, it looked like an integer. So it was an integer. And then now we're feeding it in a float. So let's see what this does. And it still works. So everything still functions. And what happens under the hood is if PHP can cast whatever type it has to whatever type that you're expecting, and it can do that without any loss of data, then it will do it automatically for you. So for example, if you fed in an integer of 2, it can easily cast a 2 to a 2.0, and there's no data loss at all. And so it will happily move forward and do that for you. In fact, the same thing is happening up here when we do things like echo, and I'm echoing out an expression, which is a string. This, we know, result is returning a float. And so echo under the hood is converting that float to a string and then printing it out for you. And that's what really you see here is this string 3.3333. It's not a number anymore because it's already went through the echo and it's been converted into a string. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. Anytime you see that you're starting to repeat code, I set a result, I do an echo, and I do a break. Anytime you start to see things like that, that should be a visual clue, and it should trigger you to try to get any of that repeated code out of there. So that's what we're going to do next. So the biggest thing that I see that's repeated, and it's exactly the same in everything, is this echo. And so for now, let's go ahead and copy this line of code, and I'm going to put it down here below the switch statement. So presumably, if I make it down below the switch statement, it's going to echo out whatever the result is, which will be set inside the switch. Sometimes I like to make sure that I visually am setting this. So right here, you can see, and I hover over it, it says it's possibly undefined at this point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I do define it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set this variable name result to a value called null. Null means I don't know what it is yet. It's not set. There's nothing set into it. But I have defined the variable, so now this little squiggly line down here should go away. So now if I were to run this again with this division, I'm probably going to get this repeated line just like I did here. So now it's repeated twice. So it comes through the first time, it does this echo. I don't need this echo inside of here anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. It's like this. And now I have my echo down here only. So if I run it again, I should just get one of them, and I do. Now the problem is if you get an operand that isn't supported, like you put in like a question mark. I don't know what that is. And let's see what we get. See, we get an unsupported operation, and then we get 10 question 3 is equal to, we don't know what that is. And you can see that the echo statement turned null, the result value, into just like a blank space. There's nothing, it didn't print anything there. And that's okay. So we could keep that like that if we want. Or what I can do now is I can come down here and I can say, if the result is not null, I want to do this line of code. Else I want to do this line of code right here. So let's go ahead and paste that in there. I don't need to default it all anymore. So all of this switch statement now, if I hit one of the operands, I'm going to set the result. Otherwise, if I don't hit an operand, it's going to stay null. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to either output the result or I'm going to output this unsupported operation. So let's go ahead and look and see what that looks like. And so with the unsupported operation of question mark, I get just that line of code. If I switch it back to something that's supported, let's say multiplication, I get the multiplication result. All right, so now when we start to look at my code again, I'm starting to think that maybe we need more functions. So here I'm computing the result, but I have to have the operator num1, num2, and I end up with some result. So what if we take all of this and we create a compute function? So far I've had my parse expression, I have all the individual operations for that, but maybe I'm going to have a compute function that's going to take float a, b, and a string operator. And I'm going to return something here, and we're not going to put the return value in yet because let's talk about what that will be. But I should be able to take all of this code, this result code right here, and I should be able to put it into my compute function. And then I'm going to return result. Now, here I called this A, so num1's A, and that's okay because we can rename these things. When they get passed in, they get passed in by value. And so we're really getting a new variable in here and it has a name B instead of num2, and that's totally fine. So I get these results and then I'm going to return that result. Up here, I don't need all this code up here now. So now I can simplify and I can take all of this and I can say compute, and I can feed in num1, num2, and the operator. So I've significantly simplified this code. I've encapsulated the compute logic into a function called compute. Now it is complaining here, and we'll talk about that in a second, but let's go and make sure this works again. So I haven't really changed anything, and we get the same exact result. Now one of the things that this is complaining about is I don't have the type. It says, hey, you're missing a type. And it's giving me a hint. I can add this question mark float as the function's return type. So if I just have float, what that means is it's going to return a float. But we also need to be able to return the value of null. So I need to be able to return null. So this has to be a nullable. That's what that means. It's a nullable float. This should all work, and it's not complaining anymore about the typing. This bit of code right here is really output the result. I compute the result and then I output the result. We can once again, let's take this and let's make a function. And right here we are going to feed in a nullable float, which is called result. And this is not going to return anything. It's a void function. So it returns a void, but takes a nullable float. The result is there. And now my IDE is telling me it needs access to a couple of more variables. There's an exp. Now this is a great time to talk about scope. We have exp, and it's defined all the way at the top. That's our expression, and it's in this scope right here. I want to be able to use it inside of this function. And same thing with the operator. I had this operator. It was part of the data that we parsed out of our expression. It's right here. And I passed it into compute, but I didn't pass it into our output function, which is going to replace all of this. So I should be able to replace all of this with a call to our output, and we're just feeding in the result just like that. So how do I fix this? If I run this right now, I'm going to get an error. Well, it's important to see these errors every once in a while. So let's go ahead and run it. So it's going to give us this error because it's going to say here on line 57, which is this line right here, there's an exp variable and it's undefined. Because in this scope, it doesn't know anything about that exp variable. So I'll give you a couple of ways to fix this. One is we know that that's available in my global scope up here. This was initially defined. What I could say right down here, and the same thing for operator, is I could use the global keyword and put in the variables that we want to use from the global scope. And now you can see the underline, the squiggly underline has disappeared. When I run this, this should function as it did before. 10 times 3 is equal to 30. So that's one way to get rid of this. It's probably the best way in this particular example. Another way is you could feed each of those in to the function itself. So this is a second way. I could feed those in. Now they're defined, but up here, I should see that it's kind of telling me, hey, I need more. So I need to feed everything in like that. So this again should just work, and it does. It's exactly the same thing as it did before. So if I change the operand to maybe a plus, everything should still work. I get 13. Now here we're feeding in 2 extra variables. I actually like it a little cleaner the other way. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove those variables, and let's put them back to use the global ones because they really are, in this particular case, the same thing. And so some of the terms that you're going to hear are local scope and you're going to hear global scope. As an example, this variable right here called result, and again, we can call it whatever we want here. So it could be the value, whatever it is. I could rename and use value here. And this should still all work. So let me just refresh this and we get the same answer. Value is a variable inside of this function called output. And it's only accessible inside of that function. It's got local scope. So it's only available locally to this function. If this line is commented out, variables like exp and operator, and those are defined globally. So they're out here, defined out here. But inside of this function output, we don't have access to them yet. By using this keyword global, what we're telling PHP is, hey, inside this function, I want access to these global. And they don't provide that access on purpose because variable names, sometimes you can use the same name over and over again, especially in different contexts. I might have a function where exp means something else or operator means something else. I don't want to just by default assume that you're using the global variables everywhere. So it's not by default. You have to include them manually anytime you want to use a global variable. Okay, so we're at a pretty good point right now. So if I look at the global area, which is from here to here, line 16, we have the expression coming in, we're parsing the expression, we're computing a result, and we have the output. We have these functions down here then that we've created to do these individual operations. If you look at all in all, yeah, maybe we have more code than we probably needed, but everything's encapsulated into its own function, which makes it more maintainable. So I tend to lean towards being more verbose when it means that I can have more maintainable code. So at this point, we are going to stop this right here, and I want to introduce in the next couple of videos how we can make this even a little bit more maintainable.